From the Squamish Chief.
This is the Squamish Sound. I'm Keely Bartlett.
And I'm Stephen Chua. This is the 22nd episode of our weekly podcast.
You'll hear the story behind the story as we take you into the newsroom. We'll talk about what did and didn't get into the newspaper this week.
On the show today, we're covering a climber recently took a fatal fall from the Stawamus Chief. The 1-year anniversary of the Shannon Falls deaths draws near. Vanlife advocates are cautiously optimistic about the revised camping bylaw, and carbon engineering gets a $25 million loan from the federal government. First off, over the weekend, it was a little bit crazy. In addition to wildfires breaking out, on top of that, there was also a climber who had a fatal accident on the Stawamus Chief, taking a fall from the Grand Wall. Keely was on shift during that time.
I was.
What can you tell us about what happened?
So what we know officially is that a man in his 30s fell while he was climbing the Grand Wall from about 30 meters. And when I contacted the BC Ambulance Services, BC EHS, who are our first line of contact in this, they said that they did not take anybody to the hospital, which means that he died on scene. And they told me to contact the coroner's office. So we knew pretty quickly that there had been a fatal accident, that at least one person was dead. And so we followed through the steps of what happens next. We contacted the coroner, who confirmed that somebody had died, and then we contacted the RCMP, who released a press release about the incident. So there wasn't much that responders were able to do, although there were a lot of responders who were at the scene quite quickly after the incident happened. So when something like this happens, generally the reaction from the community is everybody is looking at the press release or looking at the news story and thinking, oh, I know so many people who fit this description, because the RCMP hadn't released a name since they were still trying to contact the man's family. And generally, when it's a private citizen, the police and the coroner most times will not name somebody who has died in a way like this unless there's a reason that the public needs to know. And so in this case, we don't have his name. We don't know if he's local or not. And other ways that we would find out is generally family and friends would come forward and say, we know him, or you would see it on social media and we would try to confirm that. So that hasn't happened in this case. So we don't have any answers as to who it is, and we don't have the answers to what technically happened with the climb to result in a death. So those are the two questions that people always ask immediately after finding out about an incident like this, because everyone wants to know, is it somebody I know? And then the next thing they want to know is, what can I do to make sure that that doesn't happen to me or my friends, right? What steps can you take? Is this a freak accident, or was it preventable, basically? So we don't have those answers, unfortunately, in this time. And if more news comes forward, we will follow up. We will be putting that information out there if we get it. At this point, it doesn't really seem likely.
And I might add that this has been an interesting theme because previously, at least in my experience, the coroners and the RCMP used to be a lot more forthcoming with information. Previously, it would be releasing names used to be a fairly regular thing, regardless of whether it was the coroners or the RCMP. But due to, I guess, more conservative interpretations of privacy law, that has been happening less and less often. And we do understand that obviously there is a need for privacy in some cases, but at the same time, it does prevent us from publishing information that a lot of people could find useful, such as details on how the thing happened, who is behind it, and that could help, in addition to educate people, allay some worry, because if you know who it happened to, you're not thinking, how big does my friend circle extend, right?
Well, one thing is that the coroner's office is still investigating this death. We don't know if that investigation, if the results will be released publicly. And it, as far as we know, last we checked, it was still an active investigation. And the RCMP and Search and Rescue were not able to tell us any details about what happened. They don't really know. So at this point, that's all of the information we have. But it is always interesting following these kind of accidents as how it, momentarily shakes the community, right?
Yeah.
And so this was the first, since this happened on June 22nd, technically the summer season begins on June 21st. So this was one day into summer. And it's the first of the season. Last summer season, there were quite a few deaths in the Sea to Sky.
That's right.
With outdoor-related activities that search and rescue responded to. So I think there were a total of 7 deaths. Most of them were water-related. Most people remember there were several drownings. And then, of course, there was the incident at Shannon Falls.
Exactly. And you've been following up on this quite closely as the anniversary is drawing quite near.
As close as we are able to. So the first anniversary of the Shannon Falls deaths that took the lives of 3 people, that is coming up on July 3rd, so this week. We have reached out to their friends, the High on Life YouTubers who were there when it happened and have continued their YouTube channel since. They have not responded to our request for comment on the anniversary. We have reached out to the coroner's office, of course, who said that the investigation into those deaths are still ongoing. So we don't really have any answers yet about what happened, but I recently had the opportunity to go up to that area of Shannon Falls where the 2 pools are, where the YouTubers were when it happened. And I went with the president of Squamish Search and Rescue, BJ Shute, and he described to the best of their knowledge what had happened. He showed me where they had cleared an area of trees for a helicopter to hover, not necessarily land, but hover so that they could get rappellers and divers closer to where they needed to recover the bodies from. And what was really interesting when we were out there, it's not a difficult hike. I mean, I was able to do it with a broken arm, so not too hard. But when we got to the top, BJ pulled up this Instagram photo he'd taken a screenshot of and shared with some of the SAR members. And it was posted right before the May long weekend. We don't know when it was taken, but it was posted right before the May long weekend. And in the photo, you could see people, there were probably between 5 and 10 people at the lower pool, which is where the people fell. And you could see people standing exactly where he had pointed to me as we were standing there, where they believed that these people fell from and how they believed it happened, which we don't have the details from the investigation yet, but we'll see if they have been able to determine that. And it was just so chilling to see this photo that's so Instagram perfect.
Right.
It is stunning. And it looks like it's an easy, breezy, fun place to hang out. A lot of people do hang out there. But when we went the other day, the water's still rushing. It's not the time of year when you would consider going into the water.
Right.
But he showed me where the water line was when we visited. When these deaths happened, the water was 6 to 8 inches higher. So it would have been rushing. So I had never been to that area of Shannon Falls before, which is why I asked if BJ was able to take me out to kind of get a better idea of what happened so that when we're reporting on it, we can describe it better.
Yeah.
A lot of people have been up there and know what we're talking about, but to be there knowing that had happened was kind of a chilling experience. It's hard to really enjoy yourself there. When we were there, the rocks were a little slippery, so we obviously gave the edge a lot of room so that nothing happened. But it was the same feeling that I had after this incident with the climber's death, is that, you look up at the chief and you know what can happen quickly, and you know what can happen even if you are very prepared.
Yeah.
So we will keep reporting on this, and, hopefully we will all take the precautions that we can when we're playing outdoors.
next thing that we're going to be taking a look at is a recent council meeting where the revised version of the camping bylaw, which has drawn much attention, was presented. And long story short, this bylaw, the original form, a lot of people were very worried that it would basically create the ability for the district to kick out van lifers in general. And as we know, living in your van is definitely one of the things that makes Squamish Squamish. So naturally, a lot of people were very upset with it. People came out in full force, packed the municipal chambers during their the first meeting where this was being contemplated for a pass. That did not happen. So instead of giving all 3 readings, they decided to just take it one step at a time and keep on drawing feedback, which has led to this latest iteration, which is a revised version. There's several things that are a little bit different about this. Instead of a blanket camping ban, there's a reduced area where you cannot camp. So previously, anything that was within the district boundaries, you just couldn't camp there. Now it is concentrated mainly in the estuary/spit area, as well as the Mamquam River Forest Service Road. That being said, just because the camping ban applies to those areas doesn't necessarily mean you can just go out and, let's say, camp in the middle of the street wherever in downtown.
Right.
Because there are other bylaws which would allow enforcement officers to basically kick you off the street. So if you tried setting up a tent in the middle of a road, that wouldn't happen because we have roadway bylaws saying you cannot obstruct like a public area for X amount of time.
But are these enforcement officers the same bylaw officers who only work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday?
So that's a little bit of, technically probably yes, but that's a little bit of a gray area because from at least what I saw for the initial meeting, one of the things that they did is they brought in RCMP, they brought in conservation, they brought in people from all sorts of different arms of government or areas. And they all said, we all want to work together on this.
So it could be full-time enforcement.
So it could be something that RCMP do. It could be something that conservation does. I don't want to guarantee that, but judging by the show of support from all those branches of government or outside the municipal government, like provincial and so on and so forth, it could be enforced, it seems, by a number of different authorities.
Okay.
Yes. So the camping area is reduced, but that doesn't mean that they have free reign necessarily, which actually did prompt me to talk to 2 of the people that are kind of the big public faces of this, Rufio West and Thomasina Pigeon. Rufio West is an organizer with the Vehicle Residents of Squamish Advocacy Group, and Thomasina Pigeon is a person who is responsible for the petition that drew literally thousands of signatures against the camping bylaw. So I asked them, given that these 2 very popular areas, Mamquam River FSR and the estuary, are now out of bounds, where there's space for van lifers to go. Because generally speaking, if you talk to a lot of people, they're like, well, the reason why people clustered around those 2 areas was because it was quite hard to find places to van life in the city to begin with. Thomasina Pigeon.
There's a lot of no camping signs in parking lots around town that, they go unused at night that we used to stay at before the no camping sign went up. And when the no camping signs went up, we basically were kind of like, okay, well, we can't stay here anymore. So we went to the Forest Service Road.
Like you can't do roadways, you can't do some parking lots, or sometimes you can, but it's all based on luck. So I asked them if that's still permitted enough leeway for van lifers, given that these 2 very central spots are being eliminated. Rufio West.
People are going to have to be a bit more creative. People who aren't local and don't know the areas as well, they might have a little bit more trouble. But those of us who are locals, it might be inconvenience, but we should be able to figure out different spaces to go because the affected regions are a lot smaller than, say, the whole district as was originally outlined.
It mentions permits, which was a very, very big ask from the van lifers. They said, we want to work with this. How about we install a permitting system so we can ensure that responsible van lifers get to stay, locals get to stay, while still kind of controlling and regulating things.
Right.
So there is language in the bylaw that mentions permits. There's a section where it says it does not basically apply if you have a permit. But one thing is that it doesn't really specify anything else regarding it.
How to get one, who qualifies, yeah.
All those key details that would make a permit system happen aren't there. So I was curious to know how these two advocates felt about it. Rufio was under the impression that, this is kind of a compromise just to have something for the summer. So we'll let him talk.
No one's perfectly happy about it, but it's a compromise to make sure it works this year. I think in this bylaw, it's acceptable because you don't know what is coming, but it's created a space for that to have a play in this. But one thing we'd like to explore is getting a formal commitment from council on the upcoming solutions. Just having a commitment on the books to doing this work and getting it into place.
And one thing that we didn't really hear a lot of, simply because, at least at all the council meetings I've been to, there were no people who were supporting the bylaw present, or at least if they were there, they weren't saying a thing. So
which we've said we can't report on.
Exactly.
You keep your mouth shut.
Exactly. So the latest council meeting where they were discussing this draft, there was one person who was actually not representing Vanlife for a change, and his name is Robin Sherry. He is the founder of Squamish Canyon, which is a proposed recreational development which would feature eco tours.
And that's on the Mamquam River Forest Service Road, isn't it?
It's his tenure is very close to where, if it's not like right on it, it's fairly close to where that would be. And his thing was that there was recently a wildfire at Powerhouse Springs Road, which is just off the Mamquam FSR. He has his tenure fairly close there. He notes there's a lot of infrastructure and residential buildings that are within that general area. And he said, geez, guys, there's a wildfire right here now. Squamish Fire Rescue strongly suspects it was human caused. And it's probably a result of campers. So why are we not paying more attention to that aspect? And so he had some pretty strong words with respect to that.
Fires are things that make a major, major difference in our town. And whether there's camping or not camping, whether we have a large supply, whether businesses can run, whether the houses in the interface section are affected. So let's please consider the drastic change in our climate right now and how many dry summers we've had in a row and the increasing winds, and that we have multiple people going out there. I went out there the other night, and right after that fire happened, I went out and talked to two people that had driven right into the same spot and wanted to start a fire. Exact same spot, two different people right after that. And that wasn't counting all the other ones that were parked along the road, underneath the power lines, which I'm pretty sure is a 10-year on-ground land.
So, to be clear, however, this section of the Mamquam River FSR has not been covered by the camping ban. Not because the district doesn't want to do it there, but the district says that that's actually private property, or it's land that is governed by other jurisdictions, other people, and our bylaw officers don't really have the ability to do that.
Right.
However, they said that it's possible for them to approach those landowners and maybe kind of figure out a way to work with them on that. So we'll be following that part. That will definitely be something that a lot of people will be concerned about, especially since this wildfire season, we've already had a few. It's becoming an increasingly real and dangerous threat. So those concerns also certainly should have some balance in this. So yeah, there you have it for camping. Okay, we're bringing in editor.
Who is she?
That's how it starts. We're bringing in our editor, Jennifer Thuncher, for her pick on what is hot this week. Jen, what do you got for us?
Hey, Stephen. I thought we could talk about Keely's story. Sorry, I will speak into the mic. We will talk about the story Keeley wrote about carbon engineering and the $25 million that Jonathan Wilkinson came in to discuss.
Okay, so this $25 million, what is the significance of it?
Well, that's the thing. So it's a loan to carbon engineering, and the point I really wanted to discuss is that right now we're obviously heading into the federal election in the fall, and so any of these visits by politicians at the federal level are basically campaigning, right? So I think it needs to be viewed through the lens of campaigning. He came here and had a backdrop of carbon engineering, and so I thought it was very interesting what David Keith, one of the founders of the company, had to say, because it's pretty tough when, politicians ride in, and carbon engineering has been a sweetheart of every politician practically at every level, locally, federally. And so it's pretty hard when someone's standing there saying, hey guys, we're giving you a $25 million loan to really say anything other than thank you, my liege, right? But David Keith didn't do that. And I thought that was interesting. So let's have a listen.
If we want technologies to be deployed at scale in 2030 or 2035, not just one plant, but really deployed at scale, we need to have started the process of innovation 10 or 15 years ago. That's what it takes, not just for this company, for any kind of transformative hard industrial technology that's going to be deployed at the scale to have a relevant impact on the global energy and carbon system. That's the challenge. And that challenge can't be met by quick fixes. It needs to be met by sustained work and sustained support, as we've been so grateful to get here in Canada. And that work doesn't come from little incremental funding like this. In the end, that work in the long run comes from systematic rules that governments impose that put a price on using the atmosphere as a waste dump. There's really nothing else to say. We're not going to solve a problem at this scale by nitpicking with little innovation. We're going to do it by supporting innovation like we have, and then putting transparent, simple rules that disincentivize using the atmosphere as a waste dump and that incentivize cleaning it up. That is the core of how this is going to work. And I think with this announcement, we made a real step in our company towards being a part of that future.
Okay, so, I mean, he did seem to be quite grateful, but at the same time, he noted that, or at least appeared to say that this is just one small drop in the bucket. Am I right? Yeah,
and that if we want to tackle climate change, this company by itself, by its own admission, isn't going to be able to save the planet, and nor should it be expected to. And so I think that's what he was saying. And so my 2 points with bringing it up was that this isn't going to completely tackle climate change. And secondly, that these announcements, whenever our readers or viewers or listeners see these announcements from here on in, think campaigning, because that's what they are. We aren't in an official campaign mode. The writ hasn't been dropped, but that's what any of these things are from any of the parties. And it's just good to have that in the back of your mind as you see things pop up in the coming days and weeks.
Thanks, Jen. Keeping it real.
Ciao.
Just a short note, we're going to be taking a break from the podcast next week. You can expect to find us the week after. See you soon.
The Squamish Sound is brought to you by the Squamish Chief. The music for this episode was produced by Stephen Chua, cover photo by Clayton Matthews. Have a story tip? Give us a call at 604-892-9161. Send an email to news@squamishchief.com. You can read these stories and more online at squamishchief.com, the newspaper, and have the news delivered to your door every week.